There is a feeling you've had maybe 100 times in your adult life that you've never told anyone about. It happens at the threshold of a store. You walked in, you browsed, you didn't buy anything. And now, as you're walking toward the door, your heart is doing something ridiculous. It's sped up just a little. You're suddenly aware of your hands, where they are, whether they look too casual. You're calibrating your face as you pass the cashier. Not too friendly, not too blank. You consider saying thanks on your way out, even though you bought nothing, and the word feels weirdly guilty in your mouth, like a small confession. The bell rings, the door closes. You are on the sidewalk. You have done nothing wrong. You have objectively committed no crime. So why does some small, ancient part of you feel absolutely certain you just got away with something? Picture the scene, because I promise you've lived it. It's 7:47 on a Tuesday evening, and you're coming out of one of those warm, narrow bookstores that smells like paper and old coffee, yellow light spilling onto the wet sidewalk, a bell that gives a small apologetic ring when you push the door. You didn't come in for anything. You just wanted to be somewhere for 20 minutes. Somewhere that wasn't your apartment, wasn't your car, wasn't the fluorescent tundra of the grocery store. You browsed. You picked up a hardcover, read the first page, put it back. You flipped open a cookbook, smiled at a photograph of a lemon tart, closed it. 25 minutes passed. And now you're walking toward the door, and your chest is tight in that specific, ridiculous way. You probably think this is just you. It isn't. It happens in the clothing store when you've tried on 3 things and none of them fit, and you walk past the attendant who brought them to your dressing room, and you find yourself over-explaining, "The fit just wasn't right. Thank you so much, really, thank you." It happens in the boutique coffee shop where you walked in, saw the line, walked out, and the whole way to your car, you're convinced the barista is watching you through the window thinking, "Coward." It happens in the little gift shop on vacation where you browse for 20 minutes, leave empty-handed, and actually literally apologize to the woman behind the counter on your way out. You probably think you're just awkward or anxious or uniquely weirdly sensitive about things normal people don't care about. Here's what you don't know. The people who feel this most strongly are not the most anxious people in the room. They are, statistically, the sharpest readers of human emotion in the room. This tiny, specific, almost embarrassing twinge you experience at the door is not a flaw. It's not social anxiety. It's not a quirk. It is one of the most sophisticated pieces of neural software your species has ever evolved, running on wiring that is roughly 200,000 years old inside a retail environment that is approximately 170 years old. And the friction between those two numbers is where this entire feeling lives. By the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly what your brain is doing in that moment at the door, why it evolved, what it actually means about you, and why this small, private, almost embarrassing feeling, the one you've been quietly apologizing to yourself for, possibly for decades, may be one of the most valuable instincts your mind has. And almost nobody realizes this. So stay with me. Because once you see what's actually happening, you will never walk out of a store the same way again. Let's start with the explanation you've probably told yourself, because it sounds reasonable. You probably think, "I'm just a people pleaser. I feel guilty because I took up the shopkeeper's time and didn't give them anything in return." Or maybe, "I'm just socially anxious. I feel judged in most situations. This is just one more." Or the simplest one, "I'm weird. Other people don't feel this. This is a me problem. Here's the problem. If it were just people-pleasing, it wouldn't happen in stores where you've never spoken to a single employee. But it does. It happens in the self-checkout aisle at Target when you put an item back on the shelf and walk away empty. It happens in IKEA, where it's literally impossible for any single staff member to know whether you bought something or not. It happens at airport newsstands where the clerk isn't even looking at you. If it were just social anxiety, it wouldn't happen to confident, outgoing, well-adjusted people. But it does. Ask around. Ask your most extroverted friend, the one who gives toasts at weddings. They feel it too. They'll tell you they've walked 3 blocks out of their way to avoid passing the same store twice in one afternoon. And if it were just you being weird, then why does this feeling show up in cultures across the world, in populations studied across decades, in languages that have words for it? The Japanese have a casual phrase, hiyakashi, for the browser who looks and doesn't buy. The French have a whole cultural choreography around lèche vitrines, literally window licking. Across almost every commercial society we've studied, this exact feeling, this mild, specific, not quite guilt, has a shape in the collective vocabulary. So why does this happen to literally everyone? Because what you're feeling isn't a malfunction. It's the predictable output of a mind built for the wrong environment. Your brain evolved for a world where every exchange was personal, every resource was scarce, every interaction had a reputational cost, and everyone was watching. And now you've dropped that brain into an enormous fluorescent room full of strangers with an unspoken social contract nobody actually wrote down, and you're asking it to just walk out casually. It can't. It doesn't know how. Let me show you why. In the year 2000, 3 researchers at Cornell University, Thomas Gilovich, Victoria Husted-Medvec, and Kenneth Savitsky, published what has quietly become one of the most influential papers in social psychology. It's called The Spotlight Effect in Social Judgment, and it ran in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology. The setup is almost comically simple. They had college students put on a T-shirt featuring an image they found deeply embarrassing, a picture of Barry Manilow, which in 1998, Cornell culture, was apparently social poison. Then they sent the students into a room of strangers. Afterward, they asked 2 questions. They asked the T-shirt wearer, "How many people in that room do you think noticed your shirt?" And they asked the strangers in the room, "Did you notice that person's T-shirt?" The T-shirt wearers estimated, on average, that about half the room had noticed, around 50%. The actual number? Closer to 25%, half of what they thought. And in follow-up studies, the real noticing rate was sometimes even lower. Gilovich gave this phenomenon a name, the spotlight effect. The unshakable, wildly inaccurate belief that other people are watching you, tracking your behavior, noting your choices, forming opinions about what you did and didn't do, when in reality they are almost entirely absorbed in their own lives, in their own Barry Manilow moments, in their own quiet panic about whether the person across the room is judging them. Now, here's what this has to do with you, standing near the exit of a bookstore, calibrating how to walk past the cashier. When you are inside a commercial space, your brain automatically flips on the spotlight. It has to. That's what a healthy, socially attuned human brain does. It models the minds of the other people in the room and tries to predict what they're thinking about you. This is called theory of mind, and it's one of the most sophisticated cognitive operations your species has ever developed. A chimpanzee can't really do this. A 3-year-old child is just starting to. You are performing it constantly, effortlessly, thousands of times a day. The problem is that your theory of mind was calibrated for a stable tribe of roughly 150 people, anthropologist Robin Dunbar's famous number, where every single person you encountered actually was paying close attention to you because your behavior mattered to the group's survival and your reputation was a life-or-death asset. Now you're in a Whole Foods. The cashier has seen 200 faces today. She could not pick you out of a lineup if her life depended on it. She is thinking about her shift ending at 9. She is thinking about whether to call her sister back. She is thinking about absolutely anything other than whether you, specifically, bought something. But your brain doesn't know that. Your brain is running the same ancient software it's always run. It sees a human face behind a counter, a human gaze, a human context, and it turns the spotlight on, full brightness, and says, she's watching, she's judging, she knows. When you flinch walking out of that store, you're not being irrational. You're performing one of the most fundamental operations of the human mind. You're simulating another person's judgment of you, which is the cognitive skill that made human civilization possible. You're not broken. You're doing exactly what a healthy brain is designed to do. It's just doing it at the wrong person. But here's where it gets really interesting. Because this isn't just cognition, this is chemistry. In 2006, a team of researchers at Newcastle University, Melissa Bateson, Daniel Nettle, and Gilbert Roberts, ran one of my favorite experiments in the history of behavioral science. It was almost absurdly small. It was just an honesty box in the break room of their psychology department. You know the kind? You take a coffee, you drop the money in the box, nobody's watching, it's on the honor system. For 10 weeks, the researchers alternated the poster that hung above the honesty box. One week, the poster would show a picture of flowers. The next week, a pair of human eyes looking directly at the viewer. Nothing else changed. Same coffee, same prices, same staff. In the eyes weeks, contributions to the box nearly tripled compared to the flowers weeks. Let me say that again. Just the image of being watched. Not an actual person, not a camera, just a photograph of eyes on a wall. Nearly tripled the rate of honest behavior. The subjects knew, rationally, that a picture can't see them. It didn't matter. Somewhere deep in the architecture of their brain, a system older than language said, eyes mean witness. Witness means consequence. Act accordingly. That system is real, and we can trace it. When you perceive yourself as being watched, the anterior cingulate cortex, a region deep in the center of your brain that handles social monitoring, error detection, and self-consciousness, increases its activity. Your amygdala, the threat detection system, comes online. Cortisol, your stress hormone, ticks up. Your default mode network, the part of your brain that ruminates and simulates and worries about your own identity, starts to whir. Now think about what that means for you, walking into a retail space. Every store is a theater of eyes. There are cameras in the corners. You can see them. There are security mirrors. There are employees trained to greet you, to acknowledge you, to ask if you need help, all of which, in pure evolutionary terms, register as social attention. There are other shoppers glancing at what you're glancing at. There are mannequins which, believe it or not, have been shown in eye-tracking studies to elevate self-consciousness in the people near them. The entire environment is constructed, intentionally or not, to activate the ancient watching eye circuit in your brain. And your brain obliges. It fires up the social monitoring system. It generates mild, background cortisol. It starts running the subroutine, you are on record here. Your behavior is being logged. Be appropriate. Then you decide to leave with nothing. And here's where the second chemical layer kicks in. Because our species didn't just evolve to notice eyes. We evolved the deepest, almost ironclad social norm that exists in any human culture on Earth, the norm of reciprocity. The pioneering social psychologist Robert Cialdini has spent over 4 decades documenting this, and his finding is consistent across every culture, every age group, every income bracket ever studied. If someone gives you something, their attention, their time, their hospitality, a small gift, your brain records a debt. And debts create a specific, uncomfortable, emotional signal designed to motivate repayment. In a store, you have been given things. You've been given warmth, light, shelter from the rain, a clean bathroom maybe, the pleasure of looking at beautiful objects you didn't pay to see, a smile, a let me know if you need anything. You didn't experience these as gifts, you experienced them as baseline. But your ancient reciprocity circuit experienced every single one of them as a small deposit in a ledger. And when you walk out without buying anything, that ledger comes due. That little twist of feeling you get at the threshold? That's not guilt in the moral sense. That's the neurochemical signature of a reciprocity debt your brain was designed to settle, meeting a modern commercial context where the debt was never really there in the first place. You do this dozens of times a week, Every coffee shop, every boutique, every browse, dozens of tiny reciprocity flickers, each one a small pulse of cortisol, each one a small activation of the anterior cingulate. And you wonder why browsing leaves you weirdly tired. So when did humans start doing this? To answer that, we have to travel backwards, and not as far as you might think. And for about 95% of human history, there were no stores. None. Zero. The concept was literally unthinkable. If you lived in a hunter-gatherer band on the savannah 40,000 years ago, every object you touched belonged to someone you knew by name. If you picked up a stone tool, it was either yours, your mother's, or your cousin's. There was no anonymous commercial space. There was no walking into a room full of strangers' things and deciding whether to take any of them home. Your reciprocity system, your spotlight effect, your social monitoring, all of that evolved for a world of radical intimacy. You couldn't browse. Every exchange was a face-to-face negotiation with a human you'd be eating dinner with that night. The first true marketplaces, the agoras of ancient Greece, on the bazaars of the Near East, emerged roughly 2,500 to 3,000 years ago. And even there, browsing as we know it didn't exist. You didn't walk through the fish market and look at everything without intending to buy. The stall owner would absolutely, enthusiastically, loudly engage you the moment you slowed down. Commerce was a conversation. The silent browse, the ability to enter a commercial space, interact with objects, and leave without speaking to anyone, is essentially a 19th century invention. Historians generally trace it to the rise of the grand department stores. Le Bon Marché in Paris, which opened in 1852, is often cited as the first. Before that, you walked into a shop, you asked for what you wanted, the shopkeeper fetched it from behind the counter, you paid, you left. The entire transaction was a social exchange. Looking without buying was a concept so strange it barely had a name. Le Bon Marché and the giant retail cathedrals that followed invented something brand new, the right to wander. For the first time in human history, ordinary people, especially women who were previously socially restricted, could walk into a public commercial space, touch beautiful things, and walk back out, owing nothing, saying nothing, having participated in no explicit social contract at all. It was thrilling. It was liberating. It was also, for the Victorian mind, so morally unsettling that newspapers of the era ran panicked editorials about a new phenomenon they were calling kleptomania, an entire psychological diagnosis essentially invented in response to the fact that middle-class women, surrounded for the first time by unattended merchandise, were starting to shoplift. The culture did not yet know how to process this strange new ritual. The brain did not yet know how to calibrate. And here's the key insight. We are still, only about 170 years into the experiment of silent browsing. Roughly 6 generations. That is nothing in evolutionary time. Your brain is running on wiring that was perfected over roughly 200,000 years of small group living in an environment that was completely redesigned in the last 0.08% of that timeline. This isn't modern dysfunction. This is ancient wiring meeting a modern environment. When you flinch on your way out of a store, you are quite literally performing a Paleolithic social calculation inside a Victorian architectural experiment inside a 21st century economy. Of course, it feels weird. You're not broken. You're doing something humans have been trying to figure out for about a century and a half, and in evolutionary terms, we're barely getting started. Now, I want to tell you about a line of research that almost nobody talks about because the finding seems impossible at first. In the 1990s and 2000s, the retail anthropologist Paco Underhill spent years with stopwatches and video cameras studying how people actually behave in stores. His book, Why We Buy, is based on hundreds of thousands of hours of recorded shopper behavior. And one of his most consistent, counterintuitive findings was this. The people who feel the most awkward about browsing without buying, who apologize to staff, who avert their eyes, who speed walk past the cashier, are also, statistically, the most loyal customers in the long run. Not the confident wanderers. Not the people who stride in and out of boutiques like they own the place. The flinchers. When the behavioral data gets broken down by individual shopper over months and years, a strange pattern emerges. The shoppers who experience a strong reciprocity pull, who feel on some level that they owe something to the spaces they browse, return more often, spend more per visit when they do buy, and are dramatically more likely to become repeat customers. And yet, the data was clear. The flinch is not a weakness. The flinch is a feature. How is that possible? Because the flinch is a signal that your social ledger system is working correctly. It means your brain is actually tracking the spaces that gave you something, even in tiny symbolic ways, and is quietly marking them as places to return. The flinch is the emotional receipt your brain is issuing to itself. This place was kind to me. I owe it something. I will come back. The people who feel no flinch at all, who can walk into any store and out of it with no emotional residue whatsoever, are often, not always, but often, disengaged from the reciprocity web that holds commercial communities together. They're not better. They're just not tracking. And the places they browse don't register as places in their minds, just as backgrounds. So maybe you're not socially awkward. Maybe you're not anxious. Maybe you're doing exactly what a socially intelligent mind is built to do, quietly, privately, keeping a tally of who has been generous to you and planning in some deep layer to return the favor. Now hold on, because this next part changes everything. Oh, in the last 5 years, as neuroimaging has become cheaper and behavioral data sets have gotten bigger, researchers have started looking more closely at what actually distinguishes people who experience strong, empty-handed guilt from people who don't. The finding is consistent across multiple recent studies on social self-consciousness and prosocial behavior. People who report feeling the strongest version of this specific micro-guilt, the unbought coffee twinge, the silent browser flinch, score significantly higher on measures of empathic accuracy. That's a formal construct in social psychology. It measures how well you can correctly intuit the emotional state of another person you don't know. It's essentially the gold standard measurement of emotional intelligence. People who flinch at the store exit are, on average, demonstrably better at reading a room. And this pattern tends to cluster. The same people who feel the empty-handed guilt also tend to score higher on generosity measures, higher on what researchers call communal orientation, the tendency to think in terms of relationships and mutual obligation rather than transactions, and interestingly, higher on measures of creativity, which has long been linked to heightened social sensitivity. This is the quiet reveal of the research. The feeling you've been apologizing for, the one you assumed was a glitch in your social operating system, is in fact a marker of a particular kind of mind. A mind that tracks others carefully. A mind that is tuned to the web of small kindnesses that make communal life work. A mind that, even without consciously deciding to, is treating the stranger behind the cash register as a person who matters. The empty-handed flinch isn't just a quirk. It's a window into how your mind actually works. And here's the even weirder finding. It barely shows up at all in environments where the commercial relationship has become fully anonymous. It's rare in big-box warehouse stores. It's almost absent in pure online browsing. You have never ever felt this particular feeling while closing a browser tab, even after looking at 42 pairs of shoes you didn't buy. It only shows up where a specific condition is met, a human presence, a physical space, and some implicit sense that you're being there registered on another mind, which means this feeling is not an artifact of commerce. It's an artifact of community, a misplaced, misfired, beautifully preserved piece of community software running inside a transactional shell. Let me show you what this actually looks like in real life. Story 1. A woman in her 30s, let's call her Maya, walks into a small pottery studio on a Saturday afternoon. She has no intention to buy. She's killing an hour before a lunch appointment. The owner, a man in his 60s, emerges from the back, gives her a warm hello, tells her to take her time, and retreats to his wheel. Maya browses for 25 minutes. She loves the work. She cannot afford it. The bowls are $140. She leaves. On her way out, she says, "Your work is beautiful. Thank you." She walks to her lunch. The entire rest of the afternoon she carries with her a low, pleasant ache of something like guilt. 6 months later, needing a wedding gift for a close friend, she drives 40 minutes across town back to that studio and spends $300. She will tell you she just remembered it. She won't say, "My reciprocity circuit filed a note in a folder I didn't know I had." But that's what happened. Story 2. A merchant in a souk in Fez, Morocco, this is a documented pattern, not a specific individual, will, by long tradition, pour a visiting browser a glass of mint tea before any conversation about purchase begins. No pressure, no expectation. Tea first. The tradition is ancient, predating any modern marketing theory, and the merchants will tell you, frankly, that it works. Not because the tea sells the rug, but because the tea installs the reciprocity. The browser who drinks the tea feels, on some level, that they have received hospitality. The flinch kicks in. The sale, or the return visit, or the word-of-mouth referral follows. The pattern is exactly the same as Maya's. The setting is 3,000 miles away and many centuries older. The mechanism in the brain is identical. Story 3. A friend of mine tried for a week to deliberately override the feeling. She called it her no-flinch experiment. She made herself walk in and out of 10 stores a day without buying anything and without feeling any guilt. She was going to beat the instinct by will alone. On day 4, she found herself inexplicably exhausted, irritable, vaguely disoriented. She thought she was getting sick. By day 6, she quit the experiment and immediately felt better. What she was doing, it turns out, was overriding dozens of small social signals a day, each one requiring a conscious suppression. That kind of cognitive override is metabolically expensive. Your brain uses real glucose to hold down an automatic social response. Do it enough times a day, and you will, in fact, feel tired in a way that has no other explanation. Every one of these stories is the same pattern, expressing itself in different lives. Once you see it everywhere. So, what do you do with this information? Here is the reframe. You don't need to fix this. You need to understand it. First, notice the feeling without judgment. The next time you walk out of a store empty-handed and you feel that small, specific pulse of something like guilt, just name it. Say to yourself internally, "Oh, there's my reciprocity circuit firing. Hi." You'll be surprised how quickly it softens when you stop treating it as a character flaw and start treating it as a system update from an old and well-meaning piece of software. Second, work with it, not against it. If the feeling is telling you that a particular shop gave you something, warmth, beauty, a moment of peace on a hard day, you are allowed to honor that, not by forcing yourself to buy something you don't want, but by coming back. By telling a friend about the place, by leaving a kind review online, by saying, "Thank you, I'll be back," instead of ducking out in silence. The reciprocity debt your brain logged is real to it. Paying it, in whatever small currency makes sense, actually discharges the signal. Third, listen when it's loud. In the same way that a very quiet phone vibration is different from a phone that won't stop ringing, a small flinch is different from a full, overwhelming wave of shame at a store exit. A small flinch is ordinary. A wave isn't. That's a signal. More on this in a minute. You don't need to become a person who doesn't feel this. That person is, statistically, a little lonelier and a little less attuned to the people around them. You need to become a person who feels it and understands it. which turns out to be a very different kind of person. There's one last thing I need to tell you, and it might be the most important part of this video. The flinch is normal. A gentle pulse of empty-handed awkwardness a few times a week is part of the ordinary texture of being a socially alive human. That's not what I want you to watch for. Watch for a sharp change. If you used to be able to browse casually and suddenly you can't. If you're finding yourself unable to enter stores or rehearsing exit scripts in your head for hours, or experiencing physical symptoms like pounding heart and shallow breathing at the threshold, or avoiding whole categories of shops because the feeling is too much. That's no longer a Paleolithic echo. That's a signal. A sharp intensification of this feeling can be a sign of a few underlying things. It can signal rising social anxiety, which has a cluster of other features worth knowing: avoidance, anticipatory dread, physical activation in public spaces. It can signal burnout or chronic stress, which lowers your whole threshold for everyday social friction and turns ordinary flinches into full-body cringes. It can signal a life transition, a new city, a new job, a recent loss, a relationship change, in which your whole social monitoring system has been thrown out of calibration and is firing indiscriminately while it tries to relearn your new normal. And in some cases, a sudden, rigid version of this feeling, where it becomes tied to rituals, compulsive checking, intrusive imagined consequences, can point toward OCD spectrum patterns that are very treatable when identified. Your everyday behaviors are a language. When the language changes, when the flinch becomes a freeze, when the gentle pulse becomes a drumbeat you can't ignore, it's worth listening. A good therapist can tell you the difference between a reciprocity circuit doing its job and a reciprocity circuit that has been hijacked. You don't have to figure it out alone. So, the next time you're standing near the door of a bookstore at 7:47 on a Tuesday evening, with your empty hands and your calibrated face and your slightly elevated heart rate, I want you to remember what's actually happening. You are running roughly 200,000 years of cognitive evolution. You are simulating another human mind with the same neural software that let your ancestors survive on the Pleistocene savanna. You are experiencing the neurochemical echo of the oldest, most universal human norm, the law of reciprocity, rendered by a cocktail of cortisol and anterior cingulate activity and default mode network rumination, all pointing at one simple thing. This place was kind to you, and your brain noticed. You're not weird, you're not broken, you're not uniquely anxious. You are a radically social animal walking through an architectural experiment that is approximately 170 years old, and your ancient software is doing the best it can. And honestly, the science suggests this little quirk might be doing more for you than you realize. It's keeping you tethered to the small kindnesses of strangers. It's marking the places that were good to you. It's quietly nominating you as exactly the kind of person that communities, even commercial ones, are built on. So, walk out. The bell will ring. The sidewalk will still be wet. You'll have bought nothing, and that's fine. But you can know now what that small ache was. It was a very old part of you saying, "Thank you," in the only language it still remembers. If this changed how you see that moment at the door, subscribe to this channel and drop a comment below. I want to know, did you do this today? Did you walk out of a store empty-handed this week and feel that tiny twist of almost guilt? Tell me where you were. Tell me what the store was. I'll read every of your comments, and I'm fascinated by the range. And if you want to understand why you always apologize to inanimate objects when you bump into them, yes, you do, you absolutely do, I've seen you, that's the next video. And the science behind that one is even stranger than you'd expect. I'll see you there.